Creating social bonds with like-minded people allows us to form community. We thrive when we can connect with others. The benefits of social connection are endless. They include increasing positivity, building out networks, relieving isolation and loneliness, encouraging storytelling, and active listening. These mental health benefits have a significant impact, particularly for groups who are marginalized and experiencing barriers to interacting with their communities. Queer individuals fall into this group, given that not all places in the world have welcoming LGBTQ+ centers or gathering spots. Depending where you live, connecting socially with other queer people can be viewed as normal and expected to stigmatized and even criminalized. Without a format dedicated to queer spaces where individuals can join and socialize with other people in the community, LGBTQ+ folks may rely on spaces at their work, school, or through family or friend connections. However, these spaces have their own limitations and may not be the right place for a person to connect with others regarding their identity. Historically, gathering places for individuals in the LGBTQ+ community have tended to cater towards more adult-oriented or nightlife content, such as at bars or clubs, that while meaningfully serve as staples in the community for providing connection, also often carry certain messages or themes about who can participate. In these establishments, it is not uncommon to use substances, drink alcohol, be looking for a sexual partner, or simply be looking for a party atmosphere. These formats may be wanted sometimes, but certainly can't be the only social atmosphere for queer folks. As well, they may not exist in certain areas, so not everyone can participate. Seeing the need to encourage socialization within a community that is healthy, sustainable, and scalable across the United States. Our guest today, Perry Cohen, founded the Venture Out Project, whose mission is to create a fun and safe space for LGBTQ+ people to experience outdoor adventure. Join us as we discuss the origins of this amazing nonprofit, the benefits that exist both physically and mentally from engaging in the outdoors, and what participants are saying about how participating in these LGBTQ+ centered outdoor trips have changed their lives. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our last episode of this season of the Queerity Podcast. It's been such an honor to do another season, and I am very, very happy to speak with our guest today, Perry Cohen. So I'm going to read Perry's bio. Perry Cohen, pronouns he, him, is the founder and executive director of the Venture Out Project, whose mission is to create a fun and safe space for LGBTQ+ people to experience outdoor adventure. In support of Venture Out's mission to make the outdoor community more affirming of trans and gender diverse folks, Venture Out provides comprehensive and progressive workshops around gender diversity. Perry Cohen is also founder and board chair of Trans Health. Perry has led his family's foundation to provide philanthropic support for transgender health, providing grants to Harvard Medical School, the Fenway Institute, and more. Perry holds a bachelor's and master's from the University of Pennsylvania and lives in Western Massachusetts. In his free time, Perry is part owner of a small ski hill in New Hampshire and can be found skiing, hiking, trail, running, surfing, and hanging out with his teenage twins. All of those things sound so fun, so I can't wait to talk about it with you. But welcome to the Queerity Podcast, Perry.
Thanks, Renee. It's great to be here with you. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Amazing. So I just read a lot of outdoors activities, and one of the aspects that really intrigued me about the work that you do is that you are involved in engaging people in physical activity and getting outdoors. So I wanted to say you're currently located in Massachusetts, and I know that area, the New England area, is known for a diverse landscape, including mountains, forests, rivers, and lakes. And the world in itself, right, is such a big outdoors experiment. There's so many environments we can go through to challenge ourselves and to see some new sights. So how did you get interested in being outdoors growing up?
Yeah, great question. I think especially folks from the West forget that we have mountains and ocean and all this beautiful outdoorsy stuff in New England because our mountains are great, but they're not as high. But I grew up in southern New Hampshire, and we didn't have a mall in our town. We didn't really have much to do. And so you just kind of went outside. That was what you did. And I think in the winter, back in the 80s, when I was growing up, skiing was much more affordable and much more accessible because there were lots of little town mountains. And so I feel like in the winter, you either sat inside and were pretty bummed out, or you figured out a way to get outside
Right.
and move your body. And I think without realizing that it was so much about mental health and wellness, we just kind of figured out and realized, oh my gosh, I feel so great doing this. I love it. So oddly, it was just sort of a natural thing that happened. I was really fortunate to grow up across the street from a reservoir with a trail system on it. So that was just kind of where we went as kids. And I often tell this story. My mom is amazing, but like every mom, she's, worried about her kids' safety. And I remember going to the pond as a little kid, like at 8, 9, 10 years old, without any grown-ups and swimming. I was like, Mom, did we really do that? She's like, yep, you really did that. So it was just kind of part of the fabric of growing up in New England was to be outside.
Wow, that's so great. I remember like when I was growing up, my parents used to say, wow, we were always outside. But for when I was growing up, I feel like we had that, but then we also had the TVs, the DSIs, the
Yeah.
video games. And so really, really like what you said there about how you didn't even know that what you were doing was engaging yourself in something that was healthy for you, both mentally and physically, being in that environment. And going and traversing the landscape. You said you were by a reservoir, and that was also really nice. So I think that's really awesome. What did you particularly find that you liked about engaging in the outdoors and getting into that physical activity?
Yeah, I think there were a couple things. The big one that I really didn't realize as a kid, but realized in my late 30s was that the outdoors was so freeing because there were no mirrors, there were no gendered bathrooms. The clothing was so much more functional than fashion. So in a way, it was like a gender neutral clothing line way before that was even a thing.
Wow.
And I think it was super freeing to be like, well, you just pee wherever in the woods. And everybody goes to get some privacy, and there's no kind of assigned places or locations or expectations of how you look or act in the outdoors along gender lines, at least. And that, yeah, again, I think I didn't realize how special and important that was to me until much later. And I think it's one of the key things that I loved about it. And the other thing, I think the outdoors was this place where you got to be a beginner and try stuff and fail
Right.
and learn from your failures. And I just feel like there aren't very many places where we get to do that. But part of the beauty of going outside is like something is going to go wrong every
Yeah.
time. um,
Yeah.
and you get to kind of build resilience and learn how to come back from something that didn't go as you expected. And then you come out of it thinking, I can't believe I figured that out. And it's a really empowering feeling, I think.
Incredible. I agree. I think, yeah, there's that aspect of trying something new, being with others, seeing what works, seeing what you can challenge yourself with. I think that's also another thing. Maybe you're trying like a longer hike, or you're going up a trail, or you're in this new environment. And so that part too. I remember this year I went to, have you been to Red River Gorge in Kentucky area?
No.
Okay, I was there and we did some fun stuff. We did hiking and canoeing and all that. And that was really nice. Getting out of Chicago was nice.
Yeah.
Very, very big city vibe, not too much outdoors. So I really enjoyed that. And it was with my queer friends. I remember that. So we were all just outside, just doing what we, I guess, love to do, which is have fun and talk and chat, but also hike and all that. So it was really
Yeah.
great. So let me ask, you worked, oh, is there an ambulance in the back? Can you hear that?
Yeah.
I also live near a hospital because I'm a medical student. So
I saw that. I can't believe you're doing this on top of medical school. That's amazing.
I am right now. I'm on a year away from school. I'm doing research, but
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Are you
it's
doing an
been
MD PhD?
MD and PH.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Amazing. Well, I'm so thrilled. I mean, this was part of actually that grant to Harvard Medical School was like, how can we get more queer people being our own providers or doing the research on us as opposed to, somebody
Yeah.
outside who doesn't understand our lived experience. So I'm thrilled. When
Yeah.
people who
I'm
get
so,
it are like, yeah,
yeah. Was that something you went to for, because that's a part of Trans Health, the organization that I just mentioned a little earlier, right? Was that something that Trans Health went to the medical school and said, hey, we would like to ask if you would be interested in working on this? Or did they reach out to you and say, well, we would like money for it? Like, how did that kind of come about?
yeah. So I think one of the things I do really well is network. So I was talking about this idea
Right.
for trans health and like, I don't know how to do this. I have no experience in the, healthcare or anything like that. And I had a friend who happened to work. She was the director for the LGBTQ Center at Harvard Medical School. And
Okay.
she was just full of good ideas and was like, hey, they're looking to rewrite their curriculum to talk much more about SGM, sexual and gender minorities, and how can that be, as opposed to an afternoon of
Mhm.
courses, actually integrated into the whole curriculum. And so she got
Yeah.
us a meeting together, and then they kind of blew me away with the work they were doing. And we
Wow.
were fortunate enough to be able to provide a grant to
Wow.
support that, and specifically around getting more LGBTQ medical students out there and also feeling like they could show up as themselves in school and then
Yeah.
in their residencies and in their internships.
Yeah, that's such a huge part. There's been studies that show having people who are of the similar background of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, all of those aspects, and interacting in the healthcare setting, it can be, or even like language, speaking the same language, providing that concordant care can be supportive and can help with health outcomes. So I think that's incredible. I think that's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Glad to hear. But before some of the projects that you're in now and organizations you're in now, I read that you started Venture Out Project in 2014 and it's grown
Yes.
a whole lot. And
Yeah.
I wanted to say that LGBTQ plus people listening in right now may hold a variety of jobs in different sectors. So it could be in the corporate space, the nonprofit space, the government space. Different from the nonprofit space, what signals told you to leave your prior job and get involved in that community work?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because I was in a corporate job. I was actually working in my family's business. So I was the fourth generation, kind of
Hmm.
on track to run it, which was both exciting and a ton of pressure.
Yeah,
And so I think, I think that's kind of important context because it was there and about 11 years ago that I realized I was trans and that I wanted to transition. And being a member of the
yeah,
family who owns a business, it was going to be a really, really public transition. And I just realized that I needed to have my own space to do that. And I didn't want to do
yeah,
it at work. So that was a huge part of it. But the other part of it was our corporate offices were in New Hampshire, which was awesome. And I loved living there. And I loved looking out my window at the mountains.
yeah.
And then I would look up and I'm in this fluorescent light staring at this screen, never actually getting outside.
Mm,
And just from a health perspective, I didn't feel good. Like most of us, I sat all day at a computer, stared at a little screen,
yeah,
didn't move my body that much. And I was just kind of like, as I'm going through this like major identity transformation, but also a huge physical piece, like
yeah,
I want to feel embodied. That was a really
absolutely.
important piece to me. And I was like, I need to, for me personally, to do that, I have to move my body and I have to feel present in it. And so I think that was a huge component of starting Venture Out and realizing like I wanted to do something physical. And I think that that's a
Absolutely.
hard thing to do in the US. I don't feel like our definitions of success really talk about being physical. Like I feel like we've spent like generations working away from manual labor or being in the sun or physical labor or
Yes.
something to get to success, which is a corporate job or being a doctor or being a lawyer or something. And it's like, but where do you actually feel good? Like we're meant to be in our bodies. And so it was actually kind of a journey for me to accept that this was a legit job and it was
Yeah.
something that I could actually do as a career.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure. I 100% understand that. I think speaking on my experience, taking time from school has been so helpful personally for my transition. And I really enjoy having the time to just not be go, go, go.
Yeah.
And our American work culture, there's this expectation that you're supposed to be available to work or make up for it later somehow. And you can't
Right.
actually enjoy what you do and then also take time for yourself. And I think like having a job that does that can be not it can be difficult to find, but when you do find that, when you are in that role, I think it's 100 times better. I think when you can take care of yourself and work, I think that that's 100 times better than like not being healthy. So I
Yeah.
totally agree with what you said, and I think Venture Out Project and the name speaks for itself, right? So let's get into it. I'm really excited that you started this nonprofit. And I want to say one of the first nonprofits of its kind dedicating to uplifting all LGBTQIA plus people, the Venture Out Project hosts a number of initiatives to encourage community and leadership in participants, including several day adventures, one-day trips, trans-affirming workshops, an ongoing blog, and partnerships with groups in schools and private institutions. Are those all correct?
Yeah, I think our blog is on a bit of a hiatus, but everything else is correct.
Okay, okay. Yeah, when starting this project, we kind of talked about the how meaningful it was. I think I kind of get that sense from you that being in a separate space and engaging yourself and actually moving was a huge priority for you. I'm curious about the organization's also interest in being sort of the educational hub and having resources for other groups too. Was that something where you said, hey, we kind of want to make this not just focused on organizing per se and getting people outside, but also encouraging leadership and even educating? Was that kind of part of the inception of it, or did some of those pieces come later on?
Yeah, I wish I was that smart. It was absolutely not. So I got a call from the president of an outing club at a school in Maine. And they called and said, you know, we do every first year student comes on a first year orientation trip. We take them out into the woods. We do this incredible bonding. And we're realizing that some students are coming to school ready to have a new name or a new pronoun or a new
Right.
part of their identity. And the first thing we do unintentionally is call them by their dead name or use the wrong pronouns or somehow either out them or don't affirm them. We don't want to do this. So can you come provide some training for us how we can do a better job?
Yeah.
And I'd had a corporate background. So I was like, you don't say no to an opportunity, especially one that can help your community move forward. So I was like,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then I hung up the phone and I was like, I don't know how the heck we're going to do that, but we will. Um,
Right. You say yes in the moment, then you're like, huh?
yeah. Then you're like, how are we going to do it? And then I was really fortunate. I have a friend who is an unbelievable curriculum developer and facilitator. And I
Mhm.
called her up and was like, hey, we have this opportunity. Can we collaborate? And so it was a cool opportunity to hire another queer person to help me develop this curriculum. And we built it out specifically based on these colleges wanting to do work with their student leaders. But
Yeah.
then it very quickly grew into student leadership beyond that, some of the faculty. We started working with camps. And then where it really blew me away was we started working with a lot of these outdoor retailers and brands. And so I
Wow.
never set out to try to kind of change the industry. And it still blows me away to think we've had this opportunity not just to create trips and experiences for queer folks, but to actually help the industry move forward and learn how they can better affirm participants, employees, customers, peers, their own families at home. And I still think that kind of blows me away at the impact we've been able to have in this. And so we think about it as we provide these trips, which are kind of incubators in a safe space, but ultimately we're trying to create a system in which people could choose to come on our trips or to go on
Yeah.
a more general trip and still feel safe and still feel like they get to be who they are.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to say that the part about the partnerships with brands, it sounds like that was really surprising. Was it surprising because they hadn't done something like this before? Was it surprising because you hadn't seen these brands do something like this before? Like, how was it kind of being like honest about where you could fit in to essentially improve the representation and the inclusion of queer people in those brands? Like, how were those conversations?
I think that these brands hadn't even thought about it. Like when Venture Out started and when the timing was perfect, I think.
Mm,
So there was the pandemic and there was George Floyd. And I think that was a real catalyst for the outdoor industry to say, we have to take a stand. We are trying to affirm
yeah.
people of all walks of life, all identities. And I think it held a mirror up to so many corporations to be like, wow, we're not doing anything or we're not doing enough. And so the brands really started to reach out in earnest, I think, to all kinds of diverse groups to say, we
Yeah.
want some training and education. And I give them kudos to realize they didn't do it internally, but they were like, we want to support the groups that hold these identities that are trying to do this work.
Hmm.
But I think what surprised me was the depth to which they went. I mean, I was running workshops with their athlete ambassadors who were calling in from their vans, in Yosemite Valley, or, people in
Yeah.
Nepal calling in and paying attention to a 3-hour Zoom workshop, which I think is hard anyway.
Yeah.
So it felt like the surprising and the part and the difference to me was the level of commitment and the desire of the employees to really learn this stuff and to do a better job.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. That's absolutely great because I'm thinking about a prior conversation I had with Pasha Marlowe, who was on the podcast, and how their interest was also in engaging now healthcare institutions in a lot of these workshops and training. And so there's so many sectors, right, where this is needed. But it sounds like when we talk about the sports slash outdoors industry, that we were missing that. And to
Yeah.
hear, right, that people are coming to these workshops, people are wanting to ask questions to follow up and to understand how they can be a progressor in this change for bettering LGBTQ plus inclusivity and representation, I think is awesome. Yeah, I think that's really great. And I did get to look at the website a few times, so it's well organized. And I want to also ask about these trips that you all are taking. They sound super fun. And I read
Yeah.
that there's intention behind the kinds of trips that are taken, who comes on the trips, what levels of engagement there are, and how to make people comfortable. I'm curious, are people coming into these experiences usually wanting to connect with other LGBTQ people like themselves? Are there groups that are specific to certain groups within the community? So, kind of asking about how do these groups kind of form, and are people coming in with that interest already? Like, this is something where I want to find community because maybe they didn't have it before.
Yeah, I think that is the number one reason people come on our trips is to find community.
Hmm.
And so I'll give you an example. In 2018, we did a road trip because we realized there were people all across the US who couldn't, for so many different reasons, come on one of our multi-day trips. So we decided to go to
Yeah.
them. And there was a person
Wow.
who so they were an hourly employee. They took the day off to drive to Texas to go on a 2-hour kayaking trip. And then they took that day off. And then they took the next day off to come meet us in Oklahoma to do a 2-hour hike. And then they took the next day off to drive back home. And,
Wow.
I said to them, I'm so excited you're here, but you've just lost 4 days of income. You've done a ton of driving.
Yeah, if it's not
I'm
paid. Yeah.
thrilled, but tell me why this was so important to you. And they said, Perry, I've never met another trans person in real life. My whole community is online. And to be able to go to a place and just see other queer and trans people, they're
Yeah.
like, I would have taken any amount of time off. I would have spent any amount of money I possibly could have. And that to me was a huge wake up call of like, oh, yes, we're doing this for outdoor adventure, and that's super important. And that is the primary reason. But
Yeah.
we're also doing it to build community and to provide this space that, coming back to the wellness, is not about dating, is not about drugs or alcohol or substances, but is a place
Yeah.
that you can show up and feel safer, I think, and feel like a little, hopefully a little bit less pressure on you. And so that's also why we'll do afternoon hikes, we'll do full day events, and then we do multi-day events. We started only with the multi-day trips, and quickly we realized that's a lot of pressure to put on someone to say, I'm going to go with a group of strangers, sleep in a tent, eat their food, go to the bathroom in the woods. And it was a barrier to entry. So we're like, all right, how do we create sort of a ramp up so that people who've never done this could come on an afternoon hike, get to know some folks and say, okay, now I'm ready to do the full day and kind of build into that. So there was very much intentionality in how we tried to build this on ramp to help people feel safer and to come into this community. And then to your other question, we absolutely do offer general LGBTQ trips that are open to anybody who identifies as LGBTQ. And then we've also done more identity specific trips within that. So trans and non-binary trips, women's trips, BIPOC trips, all under the queer umbrella as well. And I guess not surprisingly, those are the trips that fill up first.
Really? Yeah, yeah,
People
yeah.
are
From what you
super
just said.
excited. Yeah, they're super excited to find other folks like them who have a similar interest and who it's just like, we know we're out there, but where are we?
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I definitely think that's a valid feeling. If you don't have those people around you that you can relate to, you've seen, that you're even more interested in getting involved in something where you are seen and that you do have people like you. And so that's
Yeah.
incredible. And I'm sure for some of these people, it sounds like maybe that could be like their first multi-day trip. For some people, it could be like their first time even kayaking or something like that. And then to experience that, right, with people who are of a similar background and that you feel like you can be yourself, even just saying what your pronouns are and knowing that people understand that and won't give you the kind of cold eye or shoulder, which can sometimes happen, right? If we're talking to people who are outside of the community. And I understand we're all at different learning levels, and that's totally fair. But to just relax and have that opportunity to be around people who you don't feel like you need to hide or feel stigmatized is so, so great about what that is. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
honestly am interested in doing one. Like, I'm like, this
Great.
sounds
I
really,
hope so.
this sounds really awesome. But you
Yeah.
all are in the New England area, but you said you did a road trip. So are the road trips, are those still happening?
So that was our pilot. And now we actually have a national volunteer network. So our trips, we're
Okay,
based in New England, but our trips are nationwide. And
awesome.
often we will try to do trips where queer people have felt unsafe going. And we try to do it in a safe way, obviously. But
Yeah.
like, we'll go to Utah, we'll go to Wyoming, we'll find local queer folks on the ground there to be like, how do we come here and feel safe? Because everyone should see the Tetons in their life. They're just spectacular, but
Hmm.
it can be pretty scary to think, where am I walking into? So we've really tried to be thoughtful about going to beautiful places and doing it in ways that people feel safer. But post road trip, we're like, well, we can't do this forever. And part of the hard thing was we did a 30-day road trip and we'd have hikes on a Tuesday or Wednesday, which just isn't feasible for a lot of people to go to.
Hmm.
So then we created a volunteer network, and actually our applications for our next cohort just opened on Friday. So the idea is that people know their local queer communities, their local trail systems or climbing gyms or whatever it is that people like to do there. And then folks apply, get selected, and then we bring them to Vermont for a training where they'll get wilderness first aid, they'll get mental health first aid, they'll get a lot of kind of
Incredible.
how does venture out do stuff, how do we have difficult conversations. We bring in some social justice ideas, but we also bring in, here's how to plan a hike for 20 people, and here's how to describe it online in a way that people can understand.
Yeah.
Instead of saying this is an accessible hike, this is a 2-mile hike with a, 2% grade or whatever it is. So we kind of help
Mm.
them figure out how to communicate more clearly what is going on so that they can be more successful when people sign up. They really know what they're getting into. And then we send them out and ask that they run 4 to 6 events a year. And we offer the support. We have a mini grants program. So if a volunteer wants to rent paddle boards, they just contact us and say, it's going to cost us, $500. We send them the money so they can rent the paddle boards, and then people can show up, and it's on a donation basis. So our hope is with that no one feels like cost is an issue to accessing our experiences.
Right.
But that's our way of trying to reach a more national audience, is to try to be in people's backyards more regularly. So it's like, oh, I know Venture Out often does, the third Sunday of the month. So I'm going to kind of try to leave that open because I want to make friends in this place. And this is a cool way to get outside. And then also part of our hope is that I could travel to Chicago and be like, I'm not from here, but I know there's a Venture Out thing. I'd like to meet some like-minded people. I'm going to sign up for the Chicago hike or the Chicago paddle or whatever it is. And what a cool way to already know I will be welcomed and feel safe in this new city.
Yeah. I think that that's so interesting. It sounds like you're trying to connect through different chapters, if you will. I don't know if that's the word you use, but it sounds like there's obviously the Venture Out locations in different areas, and there's the community organizers who are going to serve a huge role, right, in engaging the people on site, because they're the people who know, hey, I know what actual environments and scenes we could go to do this hiking, skiing, etc. experience. Also, they know where the queer people usually hang out, or even how to access the local groups of queer individuals and to engage people there. So I think I follow what you're saying. And that helps because when someone, even outside of that, wants to come in, they already have a point person to say, oh, like, we'll integrate you here. And so, yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool. I really love that. And I also love what you said earlier. You were talking about identity specific groups. And I think that it's nice that people have the option to join either a general group, or they can go to a group that is more specific to a group that they identify with, or identity that's closer to them, closer at home to their heart or to their mind. And that can be also very moving for their experience. So yeah, if anyone listening in right now would like to get involved, you said an application went out this previous Friday, and then obviously people may want to participate. So how can they do that?
Yep. You can follow us on Instagram. We're just the Venture Out Project, or our website, ventureoutproject.com, has the application. Also, all of our events, both our day events and then our multi-day events, are listed. And the trips will go up right around the holidays. We try to put them up in time for the holidays so folks can ask their families for help and support if that's a way that will enable them to go on a trip. And also, I think it's important to know all of our trips are sliding scale pricing based. We really tried to reduce as many barriers to access as possible. And so we offer all the gear that folks could need, as well as trying to make them accessible from a price point.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think that also scheme is similar to like how we talk about creating more equitable care for people who are lower income or don't have the means because they have their caregivers. They may have to support other people in their lives. And so that's such a nice way to also say, hey, we will encourage as many people to come on as possible, and like cost won't be a huge barrier. Yeah, I think that that's great. Thank you so much for giving that out. And I really do hope that if people even aren't able or available to go on these trips, maybe they can at least see what the website is, because I think it's really engaging. And again, there's some educational resources there, particularly for people who would like to be in that allyship sort of role, or just simply want to know more about how to be affirming of sexuality or affirming of gender. So I think that that's such a great place to go to. Awesome. And what is it like seeing individuals come back and return for their trips? Because I'm curious, you gave the story about that person who took 4 days off of work, right? And then had a multi-day trip and said, hey, I'm really happy to be around these trans people for the first time. I'm curious, have people been coming back and then are they also getting involved even more in Venture Out Project?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, we have about in any given year, 35 to 50% return rate. And I've asked people about this as well. When I originally started Venture Out, I thought we were going to teach skills and people would go do this stuff on their own. And so people kept coming back and I asked them why and they kind of laughed and they're like, you're missing the point of what you're doing. You're building this community. These are my friends now. Of course I'm coming back. And so I feel like often at the end of a trip, people are like, all right, what are you doing next year? Are we signing up? And then people stay in touch. We've had one couple that wound up getting married. They were actually two volunteers and that was pretty
Oh,
cool.
that's
So they
adorable.
met each other through Venture Out. We've had roommates. We've had, yeah, real connections and real friendships develop. So people do come back because it's this environment that I think most folks don't find anywhere else. And then in terms of growth, it was really important to me that Venture Out be a place not just where we provide opportunities for queer folks to come experience Venture Out, but that we provided careers because I think it's so rare that you get to be yourself in your job. And also, I think, and we talked about it a little bit, seeing yourself in your leader is amazing. So that's been a really important component for me is to create this program from going from participant to maybe volunteer to contract instructor and then ultimately to full-time staff. So we've really tried to put a focus on that. And we always open positions to our community first when they open.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because that part about going from like volunteering and then working into now going maybe part-time staff and then going full-time, like there's sort of a path for that that you all are providing and then also people are just genuinely interested in. Because like you said, a huge part of it, and I'm going to go back to something you said before about how the purpose of going on these trips isn't particularly for dating or drugs or any sort of party atmosphere. I think a lot of times in the queer culture, we talk about how you can go out to a bar or a club and meet other people. But there's this aspect of, hey, I simply want to do something that is low risk for myself, but also the reward is getting that friendship, getting that community. And people are coming back for that. I think that's incredible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would love to see, obviously, Venture Out Project grow. I think it's particularly awesome too. I put this in my notes because I was reading about the potential for like leadership opportunities in the organization. And I think that's really awesome, especially for queer people who come from a background like a school or at a job or in friend circles where they feel like they don't usually take the lead or they don't usually have a voice. And maybe they feel like their voice is heard and it's empowered when they are on these trips with Venture Out.
Yeah. And I think we have a couple trips. We have a queer fat backpacking trip. And then we have some trips that specifically focus on folks with neurodivergence. And I think
Yeah.
when I talk to folks who lead those trips, they're like, this is amazing. I never get to be a leader because of my many identities. And to be able to
Yeah.
demonstrate that not only can I do this, but I can actually lead it, I think it's an incredibly empowering thing. And so we really do try to make space for people to do that and give them opportunity. And I think the outdoors just naturally encourages you because it shows you how you can do all these things you didn't think you can do. And I think that
Yeah.
builds confidence.
Yeah. Oh, for sure, for sure. And like going back to the queer fat backpacking, the neurodivergence, open groups, I think like those groups point towards the multiple aspects of our bodies or our minds or just who we are as individuals that society can place pressure on us, right? And can say, you should act a certain way, you should look a certain way. And it kind of eliminates that. And you have, again, those people who are of similar background and that you don't have to feel that stigma, or you don't have to explain too much, right? A huge part of being, of my personal journey of being trans is like having to explain some stuff that I'm like, it's also nice not to have to explain a lot when you're with people who are of that similar background. So I think that that's so valid. Thank you for giving more examples, and that's great. So I do want to talk actually about affirming queer and trans people's bodies a little bit. So it was very refreshing to see that you've been speaking and partnering with these brands, as we kind of discussed. And it sounds like the purpose is, in one aspect, to improve the availability of affirming gear for individuals on these trips. So what I'm thinking of are people who might have had surgeries on their bodies that could affect, for example, how a certain backpack fits, or maybe they want to carry certain items with them that are better for their chest or their bottom or their legs or whatever part of their body. Or even purchasing sneakers that may be affirming and like don't have symbols that are kind of like too masculine or too feminine. So have you gotten any feedback on that in terms of just the actual gear and how that's been affirming for people?
I would say the brands are so excited to do that. It's actually blown me away. Every single one of them has been like, can you help us with a gender neutral line? Gender neutral is hard for me in some ways. And I think gender neutral
Yeah.
also tends to default to a more masculine line. But I think the fact that they are like thinking about this and exploring it is really awesome. And we've also done things in part with the product, but in part with like someone walks into your store. This happened to me just this week. Walked into the store, went to the men's side and was like, do you happen to have this in a 7? And I asked, clearly knowing they're not going to have it in that size. And they're like, we have it in an 8. And she was actually awesome. She was like, but if you're comfortable coming over to the women's side, like we have a very similar boot, and she didn't make a big deal of it. She was just like, come on over here. Let me show you this. And it was such a nice feeling for me to be like, yes, I have small feet. Typically I'm going to find stuff in the women's section, and for it not to be a big deal for the salesperson, because I've had other moments where they're like, you're probably going to hate that, they make this whole big production about taking me over to the women's side. I'm like, I knew I was going to wind up there anyway. So can we just like cut through this? And
Embarrassment slash, whatever feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. So that felt really nice. So I feel like sometimes it's not on a macro level at the brand, but it's on these micro levels of the individual salespeople or the individual product designers who are really actively trying to figure out how to make folks feel comfortable. And we had this with the snowboarding line too. Actually, there was a 6 foot tall, cisgender, white, bearded dude who looks like everybody else in the outdoors. And he was like, people come in, he's like, one of the first things I say to them is, I actually like our women's line better, and I always wear our women's pants. And he's like, so I'm trying to like change the perception of how we shop. So I think there are individuals in these brands who are doing that. I still think they're stuck in a system and an infrastructure that says like men's and women's, and they're trying to add gender neutral, which I think is a good step, but I think they still need to kind of push. So I feel like I'm talking in circles, but in general, I think they're incredible people at these brands really trying to push stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes people at the top are listening, and those are the brands that it feels really good to support and work with. But I would say every single one has asked questions of, how can we do this better? How can we train people to fit people, which is basic for anybody with a body. Like, let's talk about consent when you're clipping a backpack on somebody's waist or somebody's chest or something. Like, you should be asking for consent no matter who you're doing it to.
Yeah. That's a great point. Some of these aspects, right, are you don't maybe think about in terms of planning a trip. You're just like, oh, well, we need gear, probably pick it up somewhere, probably order from Amazon. But it's not as easy as that, right? Because you want whatever it's coming with you to also not be unaffirming of who you are, or like not make you feel that you have to fit a certain mold. So I appreciate the example you gave, the aspect of getting into sort of that clothing and outdoors industry and the brands being open to changing what historically I'm assuming has been very gendered, very masculine, maybe when it comes to certain outdoors activities, and saying like, hey, like, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way at all. And I hope that we continue to see more of those changes as we also discuss how in healthcare we're starting to see more access to care, more options for trans people, for LGBTQ plus people to either get equal access to reproductive care or like have like access to gender affirming care. So I think that the industries will have to then also speed up in that process of matching what the realities of queer people are today. So I really, really appreciate that example. And as far as I have right now, I think I only have one or two more things to talk about. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight was how important, right, this atmosphere of achieving health and wellness for queer people can be so encouraging on these trips. There's been a lot of studies that have shown that people of certain groups within the LGBTQ community, they have done studies with people living with HIV who may be gay or bisexual, lesbian women, trans people. There's so many groups where they found disparities in health outcomes, whether it's obesity or whether it's diabetes, or even they've also done studies involving people who have had cancer. And so I can only imagine how starting from any age is great, but like even just like starting people from when they're younger and saying like, you have an outlet to have community that's like so great mentally, but then also physically getting outside and improving your health and wellness without thinking too much about it, right? Because you're with your friends. So you might be tired, but it's also like, oh, you're getting like good conversation and like you're finding out new things. I really, really love that these trips engage both the body and mind. And I think that that's a wonderful combination for improving overall health and wellness of queer individuals. So that's partly why I'm interested even in just exploring, because I'm like, you can do both things at once, right? Sometimes we have, again, these opportunities where we're going to like a party atmosphere, but again, like we might be drinking a lot, for example, and that can be harmful to our bodies if we're doing that too much, right? It's okay if we're doing that, but if you're doing it in excess, it might be a little hard on the body. And then there's like the other aspect where you're going to therapy per se, but again, like you don't necessarily get that physical activity in. You're doing a lot of cognitive and behavioral sort of thinking changes, which are helpful, but again, don't engage everything. And so I just wanted to lay that out there, and that a huge part of changing the health equity landscape for queer people also starts in finding out ways that we can both engage body and mind and get people to be more involved in wanting to change their health. So
Yeah. Thanks for seeing that. I appreciate it. Because that's kind of what it's been for me personally. I wanted to be outside and I wanted to feel like myself. And I think a couple things. One, like when you go in nature, it's always the different thing that is beautiful. Like it's the
yeah.
tree with the extra weird knob on it, or it's the bird with the different coloring or something. And I think of that as queer. And I'm like, what a beautiful thing that when we go in nature, what we think is special and wonderful is queer. And so can we learn to celebrate ourselves in that way, as opposed to being like, oh, this is different about me and I don't like it? Can we be like, this is different about me and it is so beautiful and so special? And I feel like you get a chance to do that in nature that we don't get to do in the city as much. And to do it with other people is kind of magical too. And you're not being evaluated so much, right? You're not like checking yourself out in the mirror, or you're not checking Instagram in that moment to see, are
Yes.
people liking my content or whatever. You're just in it and you're present in a way that I don't think we get to do that much outside of nature. And so that's been hugely important. And I think one other comment I want to make is people often ask, so do you have therapists or social workers on your trips? And we don't for a reason. I love therapy, a huge fan, big pro
Yeah,
therapy
me
person.
too. Yeah.
But I also sometimes have felt like pathologized from it when I was required to have letters for transition, when I was required to have letters for my
Yeah.
driver's license or things like that. And I always want people to have the option of it, but I wanted people to get to come and celebrate the joy of being in queer community and the joy of being outside, and not feel like we also had to always be in therapy or working on something. Like some of it could just be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that part too. That part too. I appreciate your explanation. And that's obviously something that we hopefully will start to move away from. Hopefully, we'll start to go through a more informed consent approach where people who would like to achieve care don't have so many barriers, but simply just have to give their consent and be aware of all of the nature and the benefits and risks of everything they're doing medically speaking. That's medically speaking, but I like that, there's that option to remove that and say, hey, you don't have to be around that. And you can sort of separate yourself from any sort of pathologization or feeling like your mental health has to be on display or like really surveyed. So anyway, we're all trying our best here, right? So,
Yes, we are. That's all we can
right.
do.
That's all we can do. But thank you so, so much. I want to say, what are your future involvements going forward as part of Venture Out Project? It sounds like you've grown from I think you said the school in Maine reaching out to now having like these multiple trips and like having like speaking engagements and stuff. So like, where do you feel like you will continue to serve when it comes to a Venture Out Project? I'm sure the trips are going to be still like a huge part of like what you want to do.
Yeah, so the trips will continue to be a big part, but we're really trying to build out our volunteer program. And as you mentioned, kind of this chapter idea. So we're piloting chapters this year for the first time.
Okay.
And I'm excited to see what kind of our community decides they want to do for themselves. I
Yeah.
think it's one of the greatest joys is to get to see like, this is the baby I birthed and now where's she going to take herself? And so I'm excited for that. So yeah, we will continue to do the trips. We'll continue to add things. We always try to add different types of trips that might be more accessible or interesting to more folks. So backpacking, not everybody wants to carry a backpack or can. And so we added canoeing. I think we're going to add some more biking options and then winter trips. And then, yeah, continue to build out the education because I think that's super important and gives us a chance to be agents in our own education of the rest of the world, which feels really good too.
Yes, 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 yes. The volunteer network, I think, is a great idea and hopefully will lead to that expansion and then lead to more communities getting together on the ground in different areas. So I think that is going to be really, really exciting to see. Thank you so much for your time today. Yeah, that was really
Thank you. This was great.
yeah, that was really great. And also I can kind of peek a little bit at your background. It looks like really lovely. So
It's a
um
gorgeous day. Yeah, we're having good New England
yeah.
foliage right now.
Yeah, it's like fall time. So I
It
I
is
really
fall.
love I really love fall time and like it's really nice seeing the trees change. So anyway,
Yeah.
you've already given your website and you've already given the Instagram. So I will make sure to put that in the outro that I read out so
Okay,
people
great.
are reminded of how to reach out and participate or volunteer. But otherwise, thank you so much. I'm going to end the recording now. I feel ecstatic about the incredible change that Venture Out Project is producing through physical and mental wellness for queer folks. As Perry noted, the organization exists not only as a space for individuals to connect, but also to encourage innovation within the outdoor sporting industry and gain support from schools and other institutions. I'm pleased to hear the potential for growth of the organization, as the chapters will increase the network of people who are participating and undoubtedly allow more queer individuals to become leaders and explore their interests in either being outdoors or finding their peers. The true change that occurs when participating in a format like this is the social aspect. We are seeing more ways that queer individuals can find each other and form connections that are healthy and sustainable. Venture Out Project is a clear example of that. Thank you for listening in. If you would like to read more about today's featured organization, please visit ventureoutproject.com, where they are actively recruiting volunteers through their site until the end of November this year. You can find references for our conversation in this episode's biography. If you want to hear more content, watch clips, and give your thoughts, let's continue to push the conversation on Instagram at Equerity Podcast, Twitter at Equerity Pod, or on TikTok at BEQpod. If you liked what you heard today, please give us a quick star rating on your preferred listening platform and definitely subscribe if you're on the YouTube. Take care and see you in the next episode.